Friday the 13th, Carnival of Maniacs, Chapter 8. When Kyler had parked around the corner from the condemned block, less than 30 minutes ago, the streets had been deserted. But now, as she stared out through the main door and squinted into the daylight, the area was swarming with emergency response units. Police officers had set up roadblocks at both ends of the street and were cordoning off the building. Crime scene investigators were working inside, busily recording the bloody aftermath of the federal agent's successful rescue operation. The SWAT team members had exited the building and were now getting ready to leave, visibly annoyed that some breastfed had spoiled their fun. Next to the SWAT truck, a couple of forensic experts were donning protective overalls, getting ready to go inside the apartment in search of every minute piece of trace evidence they could lay their tweezers on. A police helicopter was making its presence felt on everybody's eardrums as it circled the derelict apartments. Kyler stepped out into the open air and gave herself a moment to adjust. Across the way, two paramedics were trying to persuade the kidnapped victim onto a gurney, but the poor guy had already spent all night lying on his back. Kyler herself had already checked out and been given the all clear. None of the zombie bites had broken skin, and her other wounds were all small change. She wasn't even suffering from shock. Unfortunately, that last fact left her open to grilling by local detectives. It seemed that senior figures from the city police were arriving every 5 minutes, each wanting to see that the voodoo homicides really had been solved, and each wanting to talk to the federal agent who'd solved them. But just as Kyler expected, her from-nowhere investigation was kicking up a stink. So much so that she found herself wondering if her law enforcement peers wouldn't have preferred the murders to continue. Whatever the problem, Kyler had been able to deflect their questions by saying she needed time to collect her thoughts. Unfortunately, she knew any respite was merely a postponement. 2 hours from now, the FBI agents who had single-handedly broken Baron Sandy's pattern of death would be back in Corning getting ready to submit a full report. And that's when the shit would really hit the fan. Kyler! She turned and saw a familiar figure running towards her. He was around 5'11", medium build, clean-shaven, and wore a stiff navy blue suit and black shoes that shone from good old-fashioned grooming. By and large, the man's appearance was indistinct, but his eyes were uncannily green, the irises almost uniform in color, and his face had a boyish quality that knocked 5 years off his actual 24. Michelle groaned. The last thing she needed was the puppy dog yapping of her unofficial junior partner, Special Agent Corey Tollison. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised to hear herself sounding so tired. "More to the point," he replied, "what are you doing here? I can't believe you went in there without me. I thought we were a team." "I received a tip-off," she began. "Bullshit!" Tollison cut in. "You've been working this case for weeks, and don't try to lie. I've been sitting outside your apartment, covering your back every single night." Kyler felt like one of the zombies had just punched her in the gut again. "You've been spying on me?" "Good job I did," replied Tollison without a hint of embarrassment. "As soon as I heard the shots, I called for backup." "So it was you," she said with relief. "That question's been bugging me since the SWAT team showed." "Whatever, Landau's going to want your ass over this." The sudden mention of her boss caused Michelle to groan a second time. But just then she caught a reflection in the window of a squad car. Her face, hands, and white blouse were all spattered with blood. She didn't realize she looked so god-awful. Then she turned to Tollison and saw his young face lined with concern. "They were just men in makeup," she sighed, letting her shoulders fall. "I don't know if they believed in what they were doing or not, but I saw nothing to suggest paranormal phenomena." "Does that mean we're friends again?" asked Corey. Kyler turned back to look up at the skeletal slab of brick she'd just escaped from. "I was sure I'd find something this time. Some proof." "You're making a lot of enemies," he said, whistling through his teeth. "One thing about being new is everyone gives you their advice." "Oh?" she queried, lifting her eyes. "What do they say about me?" "Nothing you don't already know," he answered, holding her gaze. She rubbed a finger across the bridge of her nose. I'm losing my perspective, right? Right. Too much of a loner? Yep. I could have had a great career, but I don't have the correct attitude. That's it. Well, she smiled and pointed over Tollison's shoulder. This should kill him. Tollison followed the direction of Kyler's finger and saw a news crew hurrying over to interview the hero of the hour. As the hammer knocked another nail into the wooden board, its remorseless tempo beat in perfect time with the ache in Alice's head. The woman was no stranger to hangovers, but right then she could have grabbed Vincenzo's mallet and swung it into his balls. In fact, the only thing that stopped her was that she'd ordered him to carry out the work in the first place. Both Sparks and Vincenzo. She'd grabbed them after breakfast and told them to get started on a new platform in time for tonight's show. She wanted a diorama based on the theme of a deserted summer camp. So that meant a fake cabin wall, some lights, a floor made from white slats like part of a boat dock, and a sign on which Sparks was currently painting the words Camp Crystal Lake. It was Sparks who'd suggested finding some additional props. He'd grabbed on to the Jason concept immediately, but didn't think the display would really come to life until they had all the fine details in place. Alice agreed, and so she'd sent the excitable youth into town with just enough money to buy a paddle, a life preserver, a can of red paint, and a machete. As far as Alice was concerned, Jason Voorhees was a license to print money, and now that she was running things, she'd be the one pulling the jackpot. "Let the paint run a little," she told Sparks, "so it looks like blood." "Gotcha," nodded the young man, and then quickly set about making the scarlet adjustments. The carnival had reached Hunt Ridge in the early hours of the morning, and had set up in Harper Field, a clearing just outside of town. In the daylight, Alice could see that the place was a natural amphitheater, ringed by hills and mountains, and there were two routes leading out. A trail of cracked asphalt that stretched back to the road, and a dirt track that ran off up into the hills. For all her years behind the wheel, Alice didn't care for the high route at all. It was so steep and winding that the only truck in the carnival even remotely capable of taking it was Freely's pickup. Suddenly, a voice startled her out of her daydreaming. "Alice!" gasped her father, leaning heavily on his stick. "We need to talk!" Sparks and Vincenzo glanced nervously at each other. They half expected Alice to take the old man aside, where she wouldn't be overheard, but she remained firmly where she stood. "I'm busy," she snapped. Then she turned and shouted, "Okay, bring him out, boys!" George looked around and saw Judge and Mentor struggling to carry Jason out of the Whitney motorhome. Neither man seemed particularly comfortable with the job, but at least they were prepared to do it, unlike Sparks and Vincenzo, who'd both outright refused to lay even a single finger on the corpse. Revealing Jason to the company had been one of the most nerve-wracking moments of Alice's life. She hadn't slept properly all night, and at daybreak she'd called a general meeting. It had never occurred to her to pretend Jason was an effigy, because she knew no one would have believed her. So instead, she'd come clean and told everyone the truth, and either the showmen could accept the change, or they could quit. Unsurprisingly, they all voted to stay, though Freely stormed out, pushing past her father, who'd spent the whole meeting staring gloomily at the floor. Now Alice looked on as Jason was lifted onto the platform. Vincenzo had bolted a steel pole to the base of the exhibit, with the idea that they would tie Jason to the post so that he would appear to be standing upright. "Alice!" pleaded George, grating on her headache. "You're making a terrible mistake. I've been thinking about this all night, and I was wrong to listen to you. Please, I beg you, get rid of him." Alice shook her head. "Dad, we've been through all this. I'm running the show now, so I'll give you the same chance I gave the guys. Either do as you're told, or fuck the fuck off." Everybody froze. "Look, Dad," said Alice more softly, "we need a new pitch to open the show. That's your job. It's what you're best at." But it wasn't the old man who answered her. "So you think you're in charge now?" Kenton Freely strolled into view. "Well, I can't speak for everyone else, but I'm not taking orders from a tattooed slut." Alice threw a punch at Freely. but he caught her wrist and held it. "If Pop's getting too old," he sneered, "there's only one person taking over around here. Kenton H. Freely." Alice tried to pull free, but his grip was too strong. So strong that it surprised her. And the more she struggled, the more he smiled, his greasy hair flicking in reaction to her every effort. "I swear to fucking God, Freely," she growled, "you're a dead man. Do you hear me? A fucking dead man." "That's it," he purred. "Give Papa some sugar." "I'll fucking kill you." "Look out!" shouted George. Kenton turned and saw Jason toppling forward off the platform. Quickly, he pushed Alice to the ground and jumped back as Jason came crashing down. The inert body landed suggestively between her legs. Despite herself, Alice screamed. She tried to push Jason off, but he was too heavy, his moribund knees pinning the fabric of her dress like a couple of tent pegs. Freely stood over Alice and licked his sweating lips as she lay cheek to cheek with the hockey mask. "Better get used to that position, sugar lips." Glow waved the Lexus goodbye and took a moment to appreciate the picture postcard elegance of small-town Reculver, basking in the golden sunshine. Elliot had said the girl would have no trouble getting a ride the rest of the way to Hunt Ridge. But what did he know? Pamela had lived in this region her whole life. She didn't need advice from some smarmy little rat smothered in body spray. Why, if there hadn't been so many people around, she probably would have cut his... "Not yet, Pamela. Calm down." Main Street, Reculver, was only 8 or 9 stores and a chapel. But there was a small gas station, a diner, and even a hairdresser. As a matter of fact, the town had everything Glow needed, and, thanks to Elliot's insistence on breaking the speed limits, she had a few hours to spare before continuing on her journey. That was plenty of time to make some preparations. There were a few people on the street, a couple of kids squabbling over candy, a dowager in a blue dress posting some mail, and a waitress who was chalking the day's specials on a blackboard outside the diner. And they were all looking at Glow in a peculiar way. However, it was only when the girl saw her own reflection in a window that she realized it was her heavy metal black and her bloodied mouth from when Trick had punched her that was making all of the waves. "Good morning," called the old lady tentatively. But suddenly Pamela was gone, shocked out of Glow's body by the image of her real self in a glass. Glow dropped to her knees and ground her fist into her temples. "What are you doing to me?" she cried, her cheeks glistening with tears. "Get out of my mind! You fucking witch! Get out! Get out of my mind!" She looked up to see if there was anyone who could help her, but the old woman across the road had been decapitated and was drenched in spreading pools of blood. The 2 kids, the waitress, a man driving by in a GMC, they had all been beheaded, and now had gnarled, pitted stumps where their heads used to be. And even though the townsfolk were moving and seemed to be alive, their bodies were streaked with the indelible tarnish of blood. Supervisory Senior Resident Agent Landau remained seated behind his desk as Kyler was shown into his office. Since returning from Buffalo, she'd called at her apartment for a shower and a quick change of outfit. Though, like Einstein, she kept a wardrobe of identical clothing. Brown suit, white blouse. Because that meant one less decision to waste time on each day. Kyler sat down and waited for her superior to proceed. "So, where do we start, Kyler?" he asked finally. Landau was a sallow-faced man in his 40s. The other agents in Corning found him easy to work with, but there was something between him and Kyler that had never quite gelled. "How about," she suggested, "congratulations, Agent Kyler, on solving a difficult case?" "No," countered Landau. "How about you explain how you got involved in something you weren't assigned to? How about you tell me exactly what gave you the right to cut this office out? Albany, Buffalo, City Police, I received a tip-off. Credit me with some intelligence, Agent Kyler." Landau had seen through her ruse even faster than Tollison. "Getting someone to save Leave a last-minute message on your phone is the oldest trick in the goddamn book. If I hadn't gone in, they'd have killed him. The abductee is corroborating your claim of self-defense. But you went into a critical situation making errors a rookie would be ashamed of. This one's not going to go away, Agent Kyler. I've already had calls from the OPR. At the mention of the Bureau's internal watchdog, Kyler started to open up. I had no evidence. I needed to catch Wallace red-handed. You could have arrested Wallace before the ritual even started, Landau barked. But no! You had to go playing God because an earlier witness had reported some bunk about fucking zombies. Kyler lowered her head. Was it true? Had she really put lives in danger for the sake of personal motives? Noticing her uncertainty, Landau piled on the pressure. Don't think I don't know what's going on here, Agent Kyler, he continued. You've turned down 2 offers to join the firearms training team at Quantico. You keep applying for posts that get you closer to New Jersey. Every time a report mentions life after death, you go running. Even though it's damaging your career, you just won't let the Voorhees case go, will you? Kyler wanted to answer, but all she could manage was guilty silence. Glow closed her eyes and tried to concentrate. The last thing she remembered was getting ready to stomp on Pamela's head. But that was in the woods near Crystal Lake, whereas now she had no idea where she was. As for the people, it's an illusion, the girl told herself through gritted teeth. It's just an illusion. Are you okay? Asked the old lady with genuine concern. Glow looked and saw the neck drip right in front of her face. Her rational mind knew the stump couldn't possibly be real, but her subconscious mind sent her fleeing down the street. For the first time since this whole nightmare had begun, the girl was starting to doubt her own sanity. Now, more than ever, she needed to call for help. Finding no phones on the street, Glow ran back to the diner where she was met by the comforting aroma of a hot grill. The waitress turned her bloody neck in Glow's direction. Hey there, said the severed spine in welcome. Glow forced herself to look at the damaged flesh and tried her utmost to pretend everything was normal. I need to make a call. The waitress pointed to a payphone right next to the door. Glow mumbled her thanks and was about to use the phone when she noticed a small TV sitting on the counter. A newscaster was reading the headlines through a gaping wound across his neck. Glow shivered and turned away, only to catch sight of a mirror which, instead of her own features, reflected the living face of Pamela Voorhees, healed and restored. Hello, dear, grinned the psychopath. Glow couldn't take any more. She dropped the phone and bolted into the restroom, where she cried her heart out. But for all the rumors, the stories, and the legends, the voice boomed through the 50-watt speakers, one thing is sure, Jason Voorhees is very dead. Horse shit! Shouted Ross. The rock star was sprawled over a black sofa in the middle of the pit, a sunken floor that occupied almost half of the massive living room, and he was watching the newest Voorhees DVD release on his 80-inch plasma. It was just after 8 in the morning, and Ross had been up all night. The split with Luke had seriously messed with his head, so he'd taken refuge in the world of his favorite serial killer. Somehow immersing himself in all those familiar hockey-masked facts gave him comfort. Maybe you should get some sleep, Jaomi suggested, antsy. While the pit was dark, plush, and surrounded by concealed speakers, Jaomi preferred to sit in a brightly painted corner over by the French doors, where she made sure that there was always fresh flowers, and where she sat at a table typing on her computer. He keeps all in on about the FBI, Ross whined, as if the records mean shit. The FBI says they killed Jason in August 1993. But then who the hell did hundreds of kids see trashing a party outside Springwood 10 years later? And if the Fed shot Jason in 93, who the fuck did the Wessex County cops bury at the Eternal Peace Cemetery in 84? I'm telling you, Jaomi, it's all bullshit. I know the feeling, she sighed, tapping the keyboard. Suddenly she had an idea, and her fingers worked even faster. "I've read every book on Jason that's ever been written," Ross complained, "and not one of them has gone through all of the facts. As soon as they hit something that won't fit their pet theory, they ignore it. You know all these idiots. All they've got to do is get some DNA, go to the cemetery, trawl the bottom of the lake. That's where you'll find the answers." Jaomi had heard his speech so many times, she could have written it in her own word processor. "But no," Ross bellyached. "It's all, 'I saw this and I believed that.' Fuck, there's even one stupid bitch who says she beat him with psychic powers. Do you believe that? These people should be certified." He stood up and pressed a button on his remote. In response, the plasma went blank and 4 large shutters rolled back to flood the pit with sunlight. "Shit!" Ross flinched, shielding his eyes. "Got coke?" The porn star was about to look in her bag when a gentle chime came from her PC. She clicked the mouse a few times and called Ross over. "Look!" she said, excited. "There's a book about Jason Voorhees on Zingbid. I just did a search for you." Ross scrunched his features. "What the fuck are you talking about?" "Zingbid," she answered, as if that explained everything. "You know, coolest internet auction site on the planet. Someone's selling a Jason book. So do you want it or not?" "Not, Jaomi. Not. How many times do I have to tell you? I own every book on Jason that's ever been written. Which part of every don't you understand?" She folded her arms and pushed back in her chair. "Hey, if you don't want my help—" "Just stop right there," he shouted. "I don't ever want to hear about Bing Bong Ping Pang or Zip Fuck again. You got that?" "Not even if I find a collectible?" she teased. "You won't," he replied with sudden intensity. "They've all been snapped up by that bastard Nathaniel Margus. He was collecting before I'd even learned guitar. That's why my house is full of repros, and his house has got one of the most famous private collections in the world." "Have you ever met him?" she asked, almost interested. "No," he frowned, "but if I do, I swear I'll kill him where he stands." Jaomi sighed, disconnected her computer from the internet, and took a sachet of top-dollar blow out of her bag. Gripping the sides of the washstand, Glow raised her head to look at the mirror one more time. The bitch was still there. That square cut of blonde hair, that broad face, and the dark inset of her manic eyes. There was a photo of Mrs. Voorhees in one of Glow's true crime books, and it was indistinguishable from the woman now reflected in the silvered pane. "Leave me alone!" cried Glow. "I'm sorry, dear," smiled Pamela, "but I've grown rather fond of you." Glow stuck out her bottom jaw. "If you don't get out of my head, I swear I'll kill myself." "Oh, don't be silly, child." Pamela tried to sound nonchalant. "There's no reason why we shouldn't get along just fine." "I mean it," warned Glow, and she started to remove her backpack. "What are you doing?" A hint of fear entered Pamela's voice. "I've got painkillers," answered the girl with grim determination. "A whole damn bottle full." Then she threw the bag to the floor, looking on in amazement as the head of Mrs. Voorhees rolled out onto the tiles. "You!" gasped the girl. And suddenly Glow found the answer she didn't know she'd been searching for. The hallucinations, the voices. It was all because of the goddamned head. She picked it up from the roadside under Pamela's influence, in just the same way that a 9-year-old child named Gloria once developed an inexplicable fascination for a series of murders that had occurred on the opposite side of the country. Her whole life had been manipulated from beyond the grave. "You need me," she whispered, thinking it through. "You could have called anyone, but you called me. And the closer I get to you, the more powerful you are." "That's nonsense, child," said Pamela, only now her smile was replaced by an expression of sheer hatred. "No," said the girl, gathering strength. "I can beat you. I'll take you back to Crystal Lake. Back to the dump where I found you, and then I'll burn the whole goddamn place to the ground. I don't think my Jason would like that, snarled Pamela. Oh, really? Asked Glow. Then she stepped up and kicked the head square in the mouth. Suddenly there was a knock at the washroom door. Are you okay? It was the waitress. Glow looked in the mirror and saw a girl with black hair, a missing front tooth, a delta of flooded mascara, and a god-awful tired expression. It was the most beautiful face she'd ever seen. I'm fine, she answered, shaking with relief. Really? I'll get you some coffee, okay? Called the waitress, and then she walked away, leaving Glow to clean herself up. The war with Pamela was far from over, and yet this round belonged to Glow. Pamela needed Glow's body, which meant she couldn't harm the girl. Instead, she'd wait until she had enough energy to try and possess her again. And Glow had no idea when that might be. She shoved the head into the backpack and hurried out into the diner. She was relieved to see that everyone had regained their heads. A few of the customers looked warily at her. Travel sickness, she shrugged with a forced smile. The waitress had put some coffee on the counter, but Glow left it and went to the payphone. The mutilated bodies of her friends were still out in the woods. Jason was off traveling with some carnival, and there was every chance that destroying Pamela's head might not be the magic bullet she was hoping for. She needed help, badly. Glow lifted the receiver and got ready to punch 911 when her eyes landed on the TV. The news was running an interview with a woman covered in blood, while a large caption along the bottom of the screen read, NYFBI-zombie killer. The paint was still wet. Judge hadn't yet wired up the lights, and the guys needed to fit some drapes in time for the grand unveiling. But Alice thought the Crystal Lake diorama looked pretty damn sensational. Jason seemed to be stalking through a dark corner of the infamous summer camp. He had a machete in his right hand and was closing in for the kill, just like he'd done hundreds of times in real life. Alice turned and looked around the field. Since her confrontation with Freely, the other guys had spent all morning setting up the show, keeping out of harm's way until they knew who was going to come out on top. She guessed her dad had gone back to the truck, while Freely, she had no idea where he was skulking. Just then, a local boy, no more than 11 years old, came riding across the field on a push-bike. Alice watched as a sandy-haired kid pedaled towards her. Maybe she could use him for some word of mouth. Hi there, she waved. Hi, answered the kid flatly. Then he went to stare at the towering form of the serial killer. Jason's machete was daubed with fake blood, but his hockey mask was the very guarantee of death. Don't get too close, cautioned Alice with spook show menace. But the boy had already finished his inspection. He looked up at the expectant woman and deadpanned. Jason sucks. George watched through the window of the RV as the brat cycled away from his crestfallen daughter. Everything was falling apart just as he'd feared. If only Alice wasn't so much like her mother. The old man shuffled over to the side door, only to see it thrown open before he could even touch the handle. Going somewhere, George? Mr. Freely! Whitney jumped in surprise and took a step back from the man deliberately barring his way. I need to go out. Not now, George. We got business to discuss. Kenton entered the truck and closed the door behind him. It'll have to wait. Whitney made a move as if to dismiss Freely out of hand, but Kenton just shoved the old man back down in his seat and helped himself to a beer from the cooler. What do you want? George demanded. Oh, you know what I want. What I've always wanted. The carnival. Whitney tried to sit up. But I can't. Kenton pushed him down again and took a swig from the bottle. I want it in writing, he snapped. Legal. And after tonight's show, I want you to tell everyone I'm in charge. It's impossible. You saw how Alice treated me. Why do you think I'm here? Freely interrupted. We had a good thing going, George. You did all the work. I took all the money. But now you've forced my hand. I tried to stop her, the old man pleaded. You must believe me. Oh, I do believe you, George, said Kenton with a smirk. You've got too much to lose. And unless you do as I say, you'll lose everything. Kenton, please. You know what'll happen, George. Sign it over to me, or... He smiled. Well, hopefully it won't come to that, will it, George? Whitney said nothing. I said... Kenton threw the bottle to the floor and shouted over the breaking glass. Will it, George? The old man stared despondently through the window, towards Alice. If Agent Tollison needed any proof that light traveled faster than sound, he was just about to receive it. He was kicking his heels outside Landau's office when a blur rushed past his eyes, followed by the sonic boom of a slammed door. Kyler was over halfway down the corridor before it dawned on him that she had just come from her meeting. I take it didn't go well, he said, jogging after her. You could say that. Kyler's voice was bubbling with suppressed anger. He's put me on administrative leave pending a fitness for duty evaluation. What? Tollison drew to a halt. The only thing he hasn't done is have me escorted from the building, she continued, striding into the open plan where she and Tollison shared partitions, with 3 other agents, none currently present. Tollison skipped after her. But what did you say to him? Kyler went to her desk and started to gather a few personal items into her briefcase. It's what he said to me. He said my obsession with the paranormal is affecting my judgment. Well, Tollison said hesitantly, I did warn you. Michelle looked up from her open-top drawer. This is your first posting, and you're giving me advice? No, replied Tollison, hoping she wouldn't jump down his throat. I don't agree with them. Your record in violent crime speaks for itself, but it's what people are saying. Well, they'll have to find somebody else to talk about now. She dropped a compact in her briefcase and closed the drawer. Corey frowned. He'd never seen Kyler wear makeup. For seeing who's behind me, she explained, catching his glance. No one ever notices a woman powdering her nose. Tollison smiled and asked, So what are you going to do? Calm down, she shrugged. After that, I don't rightly know. Think about my future, I guess. Just don't rush into anything, he counseled. You're a great agent. This place does need you. Kyler's anger melted a smidge. I appreciate your support. Hey, don't thank me, he laughed. I just want you around long enough to steal your methods. But I don't think I'll try the compact trick. Kyler grimaced and took one last look at her desk. A framed photo of her mom sat next to the phone. The agent reached forward to take it when suddenly the phone rang. Leave it, Tollison urged. Go on, get out of here. Take a break. You've earned it. Michelle hovered indecisively as her voicemail kicked into action. Hello, this is Agent Kyler of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm not at my desk at this moment, but please, if you leave a message, I'll call you right back. Beep. Go, said Tollison. A frightened female voice crackled out of the hands-free speaker. Agent Kyler, are you there? My name's Gloria Sawicki. I need to talk to you. It's about Jason. Jason Voorhees. He's alive. Kyler's expression hardened into cold still. Okay, this has been Chapter 8 of Friday the 13th Carnival of Maniacs. I'm really enjoying this book so far. It's a bit all over the place, a lot of different things going on, a lot of moving parts, but they are working fluidly towards the same conclusion, I believe. What do you guys think about Pamela being able to possess glow and this back and forth battle in her mind and everything and the head? And now Jason being part of pretty much a wax museum freak show diorama. And, I mean, the little kid thought he sucked, but who knows? Maybe moonlight will hit Pamela's head again, and people will think it's an animatronic Jason until it kills him. Alright, guys, I'll be back very soon with more Friday the 13th Carnival of Maniacs. Until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and have a great night.